Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be testing out the new Calm Day Thievul for myself for the very first time. Luckily, I was able to see Thievul in action a few days ago courtesy of the GOAT Smudgy Bee, and honestly, I was very impressed. And after getting to play Thievul for myself, this Pokemon is extremely strong. With Sucker Punch, Night Slash, and its new move of Icy Wind, Thievul now becomes an incredibly potent Pokemon in neutral matchups, really only needing to fear getting aligned into Fairy types. I ended up throwing together a pretty basic team of Thievul, Mantine, and Stunfisk, and ended up having all positive sets in the 3100s. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we pick up a great lead in the first match, Thievul into Clodsire. Clodsire is used to just being able to outbulk things and win neutral matchups, but Thievul now has super effective coverage. Clodsire is actually running Sludge Bomb, so they are able to outpace the Thievul. One could argue that I should have decided to shield the first here, but my rationale was if I shielded the Sludge Bomb, then I would end up having to no-shield a debuffed Earthquake later on, and I'd rather take the Sludge Bomb than take the Earthquake. So now I can just shield once and then double up on Night Slashes, and I'm always going to be able to win the ones. The speed and pacing of Thievul was something that also really impressed me. Night Slash will be shielded, but I can just win charge attack priority, and Clodsire is going to get absolutely crushed in the ones. So Clodsire will get knocked out, and whatever my opponent sends in, I still have a decent amount of HP left on the Thievul. My opponent brings in Galarian Moltres. They're looking for a farm down, but they're not going to get it. Thievul making it to yet another Icy Wind, and this is going to be some really nice damage. Icy Wind lands, Moltres gets the farm down, but Thievul put in so much work. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back is going to be a Shadow Feraligatr, and this game is over. Thievul, it just did way too much damage into this team, and now Stunfisk and Mantine are on cleanup duty. I end up banking energy on the Stunfisk, pivoting in the Mantine, and I'm actually able to get a Hydro Cannon catch as well. At this point, there's really no path forward in this game for my opponent. I can fire off the Twister. This should just about take the knockout. Feraligatr does actually get KO'd there. Back in comes the Moltres. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We move to game number 2 and pick up a bit of a tricky lead, Thievul into Charjabug. On paper, Charjabug should be a big core breaker for this team. X-Scissor will shred Thievul, and Volt Switch obviously will demolish my poor Mantine. However, as long as you have shields in play, Thievul can actually do quite well here. Thievul gets to fire off the Night Slash, and I'm going to fire off Night Slash number 2 on the CMP tie. This Night Slash should be knocking out the Charjabug. Charjabug will put up the shield, and it looks like as long as I can double shield, I can just fully Sucker Punch down and never have to take an X-Scissor. My opponent knows that they pivot out, they save switch into the Shadow Primeape, but I have one of the best answers to Primeape in the meta with Mantine. Mantine's able to hit for super effective with Wing Attack, and Mantine's bulk means that even as they ramp up their damage, Mantine will still be able to hang on. I fire off the Twister, that's gonna connect, but my opponent knows their matchups perfectly, tanking that on 1 HP, and they make another Rage Fist. Rage Fist is going to actually get the Mantine pretty low. My opponent waits down the timer, and they're going to bring in Sableye. They make a very nice catch onto the Charjabug, but I'm going for the full undercharge, because I just want farm on Thievul. I can bring in Thievul, and Thievul should now be able to debuff that Sableye permanently. Sableye plays to a CMP tie that they do not win. It is an Ivy-dependent CMP tie, but this is a very attack-weighted Thievul, so I'm able to win the CMP tie over Sableye. Sableye knocks me out with the foul play, but at this point, there's just no path forward. The Stunfisk is far too healthy, the Sableye is debuffed, and there's just nothing the Sableye can do. -1 foul play, really not going to cut it here. I fire off Discharge, my opponent no shields, and we take the win. We move to the next game, leading Thievul into Shadow Kingdra. This matchup is one that I haven't honestly seen before, but I imagine Thievul should do pretty well. The Sucker Punches hit for a ton of damage, my opponent pivots out and safe switches into Corviknight. I get to bank a ton of energy and then bring in the Stunfisk. Stunfisk should do quite well here, even with giving my opponent a pretty massive energy head start. They're able to land the payback that does do some pretty solid damage, but I want to save as much energy on Thievul as possible, because I know that Kingdra could potentially be problematic later on. I'm barely able to outpace, making it to discharge number 2, and now they have to give up a shield or give up Corviknight's energy. They decided to just let the Corviknight go. They bring back in the Kingdra and have the perfect overfarm, but I believe they will need to full send the Surf here, and they do. Perfect gameplay so far from my opponent. I know Thievul can't knock out with the Night Slash, so I'm just going to keep farming. In the back, their final Pokemon is revealed to be Tinkaton. The Tinkaton-Mantine matchup is a very neutral one. I put up the shield as they're unlikely to bait, and they bait with the Bulldoze. Oh my goodness, I thought that was the safest shield ever. Thank goodness they did not get that Bulldoze debuff. It was a 50-50 chance. If I shielded a Bulldoze and it got the debuff, that probably would have ended the game on the spot. But luckily, the coin flip ended up in our favor. No debuff came through, and now I feel like I'm in a pretty good position. I can just spam out Water Pulses, pull away shields from my opponent, and I just have to always watch for a catch. I'm going to overfarm, so is my opponent. There's the switch, and they try and go for the catch. But I don't believe Swifts will knock out from here. So I can just no shield and then bring back in the Thievul, and now I can start firing off Night Slashes. Night Slash into the Kingdra is going to connect, and I'm able to get the attack boost. The attack boost is not something I needed to win this game, but I will definitely take it. I fire off the Night Slash. We get another boost. What is happening? Oh my goodness. We do still have the Water Pulse stored as well, and they fire off the Gigaton. Here, I just completely miscount. For some reason, in my head, I thought they had less energy than they had on the Tinkaton, so I end up losing the Night Slash, but it turns out it's not going to end up mattering here, as we're able to land the Water Pulse into the Tinkaton, KO with that wing attack, and take the game. We move to the next game, leading Thievul into Thievul. Let's see how this mirror match goes. This is one of the matchups that I'm targeting by running a higher attack Thievul, because anytime you're running a debuffer, if you win charge attack priority in the mirror, you're going to dominate that matchup. I can fire off Icy Wind, my opponent ends up no shielding, but their charge stacks are always going to be one stage more debuffed than mine are. So Icy Wind lands, that really doesn't do anything to me, and I can always just fire off the Icy Wind as soon as I get it. My opponent gets a catch onto Kanto Ninetales, but one of the things that's really tough about losing a Thievul mirror is whatever you catch on, you're catching an Icy Wind, so you're going to be at -1 attack on whatever you bring in. And my opponent actually has the costume Shadow Kanto Ninetales as well, which is very cool. Energy Ball lands, but at -1, Energy Ball really doesn't do a lot. I want to guarantee the knockout here onto the Ninetales. Ninetales is a very scary Pokemon, so I fire off the Water Pulse, but they will respect it with a shield. Since they're debuffed, a second Energy Ball really not going to be too much of a problem, and my opponent pivots out and brings back in the Thievul. I don't want to give up this energy, so I'm actually going to save that Mantine and then pivot back into my own Thievul. This is going to force out energy from my opponent, and I should be able to set up a pretty nice farm down for Stunfisk after Thievul gets KO'd. I actually end up not throwing the Sucker Punch there to set up a bigger farm for the Stunfisk. It does let my opponent reach a charge stack on 1 HP, but it is just going to be the Night Slash. Now I have energy everywhere, a bunch of energy on Mantine, a bunch of energy on the Stunfisk, and my opponent ends up resigning the match, so I guess I'll never know what they had in the back. Picking up a decent lead in the next match, leading Thievul into a Dunsparce. My opponent safe switches into Shadow Annihilate, and honestly, I was not expecting them to pivot out into such a hard counter, so I had a pretty slow counter switch as I brought in the Mantine. Luckily, Mantine has a very, very dominant matchup here. I fire off the Twister, this will take the knockout, but to my surprise, my opponent actually puts up the shield. They are really trying to make a play for a switch advantage. What I don't want to happen is my opponent to get a massive farm down here with the Dunsparce, so I'm just going to pivot back into Thievul. My opponent, they're going to switch out, their final Pokemon is revealed to be Tinkaton, but even with me being fully walled here, let's watch Thievul go to work. Even though Thievul has only resisted damage, Thievul can actually make life kind of uncomfortable for Tinkaton. This is by no means a good matchup, but if you're switch locked here and you have to get some damage, Thievul was able to get through like 2/3 of their health bar off entirely resisted moves, and in my eyes, that's actually a pretty significant win. Now I can just bring in the Stunfisk, they're very heavily debuffed, and they're forced to re-pivot back out and send in the Dunsparce. Dunsparce is going to be hit now with back-to-back Mud Bombs, and I still have energy stored on Mantine. After I throw this Mud Bomb, I have a diabolical idea. I'm going to go for the CMP Sack Swap, so I fire off the Mud Bomb, throw a Thunder Shock, switch into the Mantine, and I catch the Drill Run and win charge attack priority. The Twister lands for very nice damage, and Drill Run is double resisted, so it's not really going to be doing much of anything. Drill Run is going to land, they pivot into Tinkaton, and here I make a misplay. In hindsight, I could have actually made the Water Pulse. I didn't think I could, but my opponent misremembers the energy. They put up the shield, and luckily I end up getting kind of bailed out there. That was not a great throw of Twister, as I should have been able to make the Water Pulse, but I was a little bit worried that I was too low on the Mantine and figured some damage was better than none. But as it turns out, my opponent assumed that I had to move even when I did not, so they put up the final shield, and we're going to escape with the win. Definitely not my cleanest played game ever, but the CMP Sack Swap did put us in a very good spot for success, even if we hard pivoted the Thievul and got punished by Tinkaton. But Discharge is going to clean up Dunsparce and take the win. Tinkaton returns in the next match, and unfortunately it's leading into my Thievul. I'm going to do what I always do for bad leads, which is safe switch into the Mantine. My opponent's going to stay in, fire off Gigaton Hammer. Even though it's resisted, this is an incredibly efficient charge attack, so Gigaton will get me pretty low, and now they pivot out to send in for Alligator. This is pretty unfortunate. So far, my opponent is ABA weak to my Stunfisk, and my Stunfisk has not been aligned to either Pokemon. However, a Mantine up energy should do very, very well into Feraligatr, so I fire off Twister number 2, and I'm able to get them very low. My opponent is at back-to-back Hydros, so I will put up the shield and actually play to the CMP tie here. They do full send the Ice Beam, but I'm still very happy that I locked into the Twister, because I need switch advantage at whatever the cost. I'm able to take the knockout for Alligator gets KO'd, and back in comes the Tinkaton. I believe I can actually make it to 2 Water Pulses here if they try and fully farm down. Water Pulse number 1 will get some nice damage onto the Tinkaton, and my opponent's going to pivot out and reveal their final Pokemon as Thievul. Unfortunately, their Thievul is up energy, so even though I am a CMB winning Thievul, I don't feel like I'm in a particularly great spot. One way that I can get back in the game is with a Night Slash bait. If my opponent shields the Night Slash, we're right back in it, but they end up calling it. They no shield, they read the play, and now we are in dire straits. I can fire off the Icy Wind, but my opponent now knows this will be the Icy Wind, so they can put up the shield. They should fire off energy right before I get the move, so I'm able to get some redemption with a catch onto the Mantine. Mantine more than happy to absorb that Night Slash. My opponent undercharges and goes for the full farm down. So they do have quite a bit of energy on the Thievul, but I have preserved my Thievul and it's very close to a move. Timer hits 0, I bring in the Stunfisk, they bank energy, and back in comes the Tinkaton. Tinkaton is absolutely loaded right now. They have so much energy. Bulldoze number 1 does get the debuff. It's a CMP tie on Bulldoze number 2. I did lock into a Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb would be lethal from this range, but honestly, I don't want it to be, so I will go for an undercharge. I want to try and leave them at very low HP to get a little bit of extra farm on this Stunfisk. Back in comes the Thievul. Thievul, I believe, is now doubled up on Night Slashes. If I can ever make this discharge, then I'm pretty close to a move on my Thievul, but unfortunately, I end up losing charge attack priority. Thievul with the significantly higher attack stat, and they get the KO. They get the boost. My Thievul gets brought into theirs, and it's a simul KO. That game could have been a win if they did not get the boost, but they did, so the game will end in a tie. What do you know, it's another Thievul mirror in the next match, and as always, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be winning the CMB tie. We fire off this Icy Wind right away, opponent loses charge attack priority, and we should be in a very good spot. I don't know if my opponent has a worse Thievul than the first Thievul that I saw, but I felt like that Icy Wind did a lot more damage. I should just be able to knock out with the second Icy Wind and really just dictate switch advantage in this game. And considering that Mantine plus Stunfisk is a pretty good core with switch advantage, I'm feeling pretty good. Especially when a Gastrodon gets brought in here. Gastrodon is going to get the full farm down, but not before I'm able to debuff it with Icy Wind. They're going to be debuffed, chipped, and walled as in comes Mantine. In the back is Tinkaton. We get the send in Stunfisk, and we get a revenge on Tinkaton and take the win. We move to the next game, Thievul into Clodsire. We've seen this lead before, and this is a lead that we do really like. To my surprise, there was a lot more Sludge Bomb Clodsires out today. This time I decided to play it a little bit differently. Last time I ended up no shielding the first and shielding the second. This time we're actually going to end up shielding the first and then firing off Icy Wind. Icy Wind lands for some pretty nice damage. My opponent pivots out, save switching into Malamar. I don't have an amazing response to Malamar with this team. I decide that I'm just going to chip it with the Icy Wind, get it debuffed, and then bring in the Mantine. Even without a debuff, Mantine is a pretty nice damage sponge for energy from Malamar, so the fact that they're at -1, Mantine is going to be surviving very, very comfortably. I'm more than happy to no shield. I want to try and farm up and then knock them out with the Twister and exit hopefully with quite a bit of residual energy. So I farm up to the back-to-back. My opponent is kind of forced to let the Malamar go, and we'll see what they want to do. They bring in Thievul, and here I end up making a very big misplay. I thought I could double up on Twisters, but instead I realize I'm getting farmed down. I'm forced to just go for the Water Pulse, and they put up the shield. The moment I saw the Thievul, I should have just fired off the Twister, and then I would have had the ability to have my switch clock up and bring back in my own Thievul. But now I'm just down so much on energy. I end up winning CMB over my opponent, but I still don't feel like I'm in a very good position. The debuffed Icy Wind really does not do a lot. I believe they locked into a Night Slash here. Night Slash barely misses the knockout, but my opponent actually ends up getting the boost. So now their attack stat is back to normal. I'm just going to overfarm. I was a little bit worried my opponent would try and go for a catch there. They end up firing off the Icy Wind, bring back in the Clodsire, and I realize that I have lost the game. Because of the debuff, they are now outside of Mud Bomb range. I definitely should have fired off a charge attack before they made the Icy Wind, but I still think either way, it probably would have been losing. They do end up going for a Sludge Bomb bait. My only play is just to go for a terrible catch attempt, which we do not get. We're going to end up losing the game, so we may as well make them shield a double resisted discharge. So I fire off the discharge, they will put up the shield there, and we're going to get Earthquaked. Definitely a game that I feel like I could have played a lot better, but unfortunately we did not, and that cost us everything. We move to the final match, leading Thievul into Shadow Mightyena. This is a win for Thievul in all even shielding scenarios. My opponent actually pivots out, making a nice catch of an Icy Wind onto Tentacruel, but I have a very strong answer to Tentacruel, so I bring in the Stunfisk. The moment I realize it's the Shadow Tentacruel, I decide to go for a bit of an interesting play. Even though I'm in a very advantageous matchup, I'm actually going to put up a shield. As long as I don't get debuffed, I can farm up a massive amount of energy, knock them out with the discharge, and I basically have a full health Stunfisk. In my eyes, this is going to be very annoying for my opponent to get rid of, so they're forced to bring in the Mightyena and fire off energy. I do want to mention the specific sequence of charge attacks that lets you beat Mightyena as Thievul. Thievul is going to need to throw 2 Night Slashes and 1 Icy Wind, and importantly, the Icy Wind doesn't have to be the move that lands. So typically, throwing Icy Wind into double Night Slash or Night Slash, Icy Wind, Night Slash will allow you to win the 2s as long as you're shielding every Poison Fang, just because Poison Fang is 6/6/6/5, and Icy Wind plus 2 Night Slashes would be 17 turns instead of 18. Here, unfortunately, as we bring in the Mantine, we end up getting 1 turn bring in lag because we love Competitors Cup oh so much, and that ends up being a CMP tie when I always should have been able to outpace by a singular turn. I put up the shield, another Clodsire on Sludge Bomb. I was not prepared for all the Sludge Bomb Clodsires today by any means, and now I just get to debuff them with Icy Wind. Icy Wind is going to land onto the Claude. Claude now at -1. They pivot out, they reset the debuff, but it's just too little too late. They realize there's no win condition with a full health Mantine, and they will concede the match. All in all, I ended up having very good results with this team. I didn't ever end up having a single negative set. The worst set that I had with the team was 2 wins, 2 losses at a tie, and every other set ended up being positive. I do think that Thievul is a very, very strong Open Great League Pokemon after getting to try it out myself. We already knew Sucker Punch plus Night Slash was such a good combo, but the Icy Wind addition was just the perfect move for it to learn. It allows Thievul in shielded scenarios to kind of debuff opponents, increase its bulk artificially, and just really try and outlast opponents. And it also gives it wicked coverage into matchups that previously it couldn't really do anything against. Matchups like Clodsire and Jumpluff that used to destroy it, now suddenly Thievul is actually winning those matchups. I think realistically, there's only 2 things you can run that really slow down Thievul. That is going to be Tinkaton and Bug Bite Fortress. Even something like a Florges with Disarming Voice, Icy Wind will still add up on it. It's definitely a losing matchup for Thievul, but Thievul can at least fight back, whereas the Shadow Bug Bite Fort and the Tinkaton are realistically, in my eyes, the 2 Pokemon that really make Thievul's energy go nowhere. But that's only 2 Pokemon, and in a meta that has so many viable picks, I think we're going to end up seeing quite a bit of Thievul. It's no guarantee that every day you're going to queue to the Go Battle League and encounter a ton of Thievul, but I think it's going to be a strong Pokemon, worthy of being on people's teams, and for that reason, we're going to end up seeing it quite a bit. Now, if you're watching this video on the day that it releases, then happy Cramorant release day. I'm going to be live later today, hopefully once I'm able to get a Cramorant so we can test it out. I've heard rumors about what the form change mechanic on Cramorant looks like, and it sounds absolutely insane. So I'm very excited to get to test out Cramorant as the proper Open Great League returns, none of that Competitors Cup nonsense, and we'll get to see what that Pokemon can do. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is sincerely appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.